Hello, it's Mark Glowacki. We're here talking to Tom Nelson, who's going to share some insights about the new book that he's written. It's going to be available for sale through Follets very shortly. Tom, welcome to Acacia Briefs. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. It's nice to be with you.
Thank you for taking a few minutes for us. Why don't you start by giving the alums who are watching this a little bit of insight of who you are, a little bit of your background. Give us the elevator pitch on you, please.
Sure. So where to begin? I was initiated at Purdue Acacia in the fall of 1967, elected Venerable Dean 69-70. After Purdue, my career kind of broke into two distinct halves. The first half was spent in not-for-profit administration. I joined the national headquarters staff after Purdue, traveled around working for Acacia for 3 years, went to Europe, taught school for 3 years, came back to IU and did graduate work and went on the Dean of Men's staff there for judicial affairs. And then in 1978, when longtime Executive Director Harvey Logan resigned, I became Acacia Fraternity's fourth executive director, and did that for 5 years until the mid-'80s. The second half of my career, I took a hard left into corporate management consulting. Spent several years with the Gallup organization running their employee engagement and organizational effectiveness practice. Spent time at Interbrand, the world's largest branding consultancy, and they're really focused on helping clients understand returns on investment in branding and marketing, particularly sports marketing. So if you buy the naming rights to a football stadium or a golf tournament, what's the long-term return on that kind of an investment? And then in the 90s, I started really getting interested in helping clients with long-term futures, anticipation, foresight, that kind of thing, and started a firm that I still am loosely involved with today that deals with those kinds of issues. Mostly retired, but I still help around the edges. And as I said, the last few years I've been dialing it back, so I'm largely in retirement at this point.
Switching gears, summarize the book for us. What's the title of the book, and what should alums expect when they buy it and read it?
Yeah, well, the clues to that answer are actually on the cover of the book, in the title and the subtitle. It's really 3 books in one, Mark, and it's just the way it evolved. First of all, it's a straightforward history of the formative years of the chapter, our chapter, roughly from 1907 when we were chartered, and the Purdue Masonic Club before that, through the mid-'80s. And there are reasons I won't get into now why I focused on that part, but the rise of Acacia at Purdue is a deliberate title because it does focus on the rise from being founded, being a rather average fraternity through the 20s and 30s, starting to become a very good fraternity in the 40s and 50s, and becoming an elite organization in the 60s, and being able to stay there for decades after that. So that's part one. Part two is, in the course of the research, I discovered that there's a large group, 25, 30 amazing alumni who made incredible contributions to the chapter and Purdue, and we know nothing about most of them today. And so the book tries to create portraits of these men and explain some of the contributions that they made. And then the third piece is this whole question of a march to excellence. How did Acacia become great in the first place? And the old adage, the only thing harder than becoming great is staying great over time. How did we pull that off decade after decade? And so in a way, the third piece is almost a management case study of greatness achieved and greatness sustained over time.
What prompted you to write the book?
Actually, 3 things, and you were involved, Mark. I don't even know if you'll remember, but it really all started, John Hoffner, who was a year before me in the chapter, excuse me, and would go on to be Acacia national president and its first international president, wrote me an email a couple of years ago, and just as an afterthought, mentioned that it was a pity that the chapter didn't do more to honor and recognize Stanley Kohler. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you know what? I know Kohler's important, but I don't know why. I know there's a building on campus named for him, but I don't have a clue who this guy is. So I started digging around a little bit in the historical record, not really knowing what I might find. And lo and behold, Kohler is this amazing guy. I mean, he's a megastar in the context of Purdue Acacia and in the context of Purdue University. So that was part of it. Next, Charlie Martin called me one day and said that the board was thinking about honoring some other men who met a very specific set of criteria. They had made significant contributions to Purdue Acacia, but are also helped build the university. And they had a couple names in mind: Kohler, Leonard Wood, A.A. Potter, but they wanted to know if there were other men that might be considered. And I'm like, I don't know, I can dig around a little more. And in reading about Kohler, I had seen some other men who looked like they were significant contributors. So that got me digging a little bit deeper. And then, Mark, where you came into it, I think in the spring of 23, you told me about your experience as a Rush chairman in 1978.
Right.
And the IFC had gone on a new block rush system. Right. And people interested in maybe going Greek could sign up to visit up to 2 or 3 houses. Right. You expected, kind of by random distribution, you expected you might get 300 inquiries. You got over 1,000.
Right.
And that really drove for me a couple of questions. One of them is, how did Acacia ever build such a compelling brand that 1,000 men, many of whom hadn't been on campus that long, said, if I'm going to look at going Greek, I want to come see Acacia? How did that happen? Mm-hmm. And then the other 2 things I've already alluded to. One of them is, how did it become such an elite organization, and how did it sustain it over time? So those 3 things: Stanley Kohler, the board wanting to know about other men who contributed to the school and to the chapter, and your Rush story really triggered all this.
What was your biggest surprise? You've been working on this for how long, by the way, just for guys?
2 years.
Yeah.
I'd say a year of research, 8 or 9 months of writing. And I'm working with the board now, Charlie Martin, Mark Hildebrand, and a couple other people to finally get it published. So it's going to end up being a 2-year effort.
Yeah. What was your biggest surprise when you, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, when you were doing the research? What 2 or 3 things really popped out at you?
Well, I think, first of all, just that there was this enormous, beautiful, elegant history that I didn't know about. I never learned about it as a pledge, and I doubt if anybody else ever did. I mean, if you think back, at least to my era in the late 60s as pledges, we stuffed our heads full of all kinds of stuff. Sure. Freemasonry and geometry and the Greek philosophy, the 7 Greek wise men, yeah, right. Mythology of Egypt. We were all over the place, but we never learned much about our history.
Right, right.
We might have memorized the names of the founding members, but we didn't know who they were. Mm-hmm. And so I probably at one time memorized the name of Tom Alford, who was a professor of mathematics. But it wasn't until I started this project that I realized that we should take enormous pride every time we walk into the Purdue Memorial Union. Thomas Alford got that building built. It took him 20 years to raise the money to do it. He didn't live to see it actually open, but he deputized David Ross, who would become the university's greatest benefactor and who had been a student of Alford's, deputized him to see it over the finish line. The union just turned 100 years old last fall, and it is still considered one of the most magnificent buildings of its kind in America. and became a model for unions all over the place, Stanford, Michigan, IU, and elsewhere. And you would think we would know that story, but we don't.
Right. No, we don't.
And so that's one of example, I guess, of what the history is trying to rectify. These unknown stories, trying to bring them to life and make them available to our brothers, alumni and actives alike.
You mentioned when you were doing your research on the 60s and the 70s. Are there any parallels in working with the board as you have for the last year or so? You and I have gotten to know each other. So, what parallels do you believe you see today in the renewal of Acacia after some of its dark years to what you researched and saw in previous generations?
Yeah, this was a tricky question for me, how to handle this. And I ended up trotting very lightly because what I didn't want to do was write a book that would say to today's actives, and particularly today's House leadership, do exactly what we did 50 years ago.
Right.
I think that's nonsensical. The 1960s and 70s are not the 2020s and never will be.
Right.
But I tried carefully, particularly toward the end of the book, to delineate key lessons, key takeaways from what we were doing 50 years ago that worked so well for us. And I tried to carefully offer them up for today's leaders' consideration. They've got to build the chapter as they best see it. But I'm hopeful that, at the end, the book does offer some lessons learned, some pitfalls to be avoided that they might find useful in their decision-making and planning.
Yeah. It's the juxtaposition that you talk about where, we've tried to do, make people aware of the traditions, not so much as bring some traditions back, but knowing full well that it's a different era. Kind of capture the traditions that make sense, but move into new directions, but with the thought of maintaining the high standards of integrity that Purdue Acacia has always been for. It's been really interesting. Tom, where can alums buy this book?
Okay, I believe the board and Charlie Martin are going to be sending out an email blast to everybody who we have contact information for that'll contain a couple things: an announcement about the book. We have a little 6 or 7 page flyer that's an overview of exactly what's inside, what readers can expect. I think excerpts from this video are going to be included, and there'll be a link to an order form.
That's right.
And I'm not sure at this point if it's an exact order or it's a pre-order, but it's stick your hand up if you're interested. The other thing, so far as I know, unless the board has changed its mind, well, let me say one other thing. In consideration or consultation with the board, we decided we wanted to make the book a genuine membership appreciation piece. So the decision was made early on. It's going to be an oversized coffee table quality book, high quality paper, elegant dust jacket cover. And the idea, Mark, is that it's the kind of book that an alum or an undergraduate, whatever, will enjoy reading, but it's also something they can share with their family and friends and proudly display on a coffee table, on a bookshelf, in their office, whatever.
And then proceeds, Tom. It's my understanding that other than the cost, any proceeds are going to go to the Leonard Wood Scholarship. Is that correct?
That's my understanding also, right?
That's great. That's great. Any parting thoughts for the guys who have stayed and listened to this, Tom? It's been very interesting.
Not really. I hope people will find it a worthwhile investment of their time. I really wrote simultaneously for 3 audiences, all Acacia related, but our alumni body today, I think they're going to find some interesting new insights and new information that they haven't been aware of until now. We mentioned that, I also wrote for today's actives who are engaged in this rebuilding effort. And that's a tough job, Mark, because there's no roadmap or textbook for rebuilding greatness.
Right.
And they're trying to build something that they themselves have never seen or experienced.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the book can help with that in some regards, as I said, subtly offering up some thoughts for their consideration as they go forward. And they're doing a great job of coming back. So there's many good things going on. So I'm excited to get the book in front of them. And then the third piece is for Pledges of the Future. We hope it can be an aid to pledge education. And I think even more importantly, to help set the context for a new occasion in terms of the membership experience that they're beginning. Mm-hmm. And the fact that at this point, they are becoming part of a 120-year-old line of men who have preceded them. So we'll see, but I'm hoping that it'll be well received by all three groups.
Good. Guys, let's get behind this book. This is a significant effort by Tom and the board to bring the history of our great chapter to life. It's a reasonable price. The proceeds are going to go to Acacia Purdue. The order form is going to be attached below this briefs. Please take a moment and spend a couple bucks. It's not a lot of money. We'd appreciate the effort and the contribution. Thanks very much, Tom. Enjoyed our conversation.
I did too. Enjoyed it. Thanks.